Welcome back. This time we're taking an in-depth, spoiler-filled look at The Dark Tower, the new live-action film adaptation of Stephen King's epic book series. Now, if you have not seen the movie or not read the books, I recommend you not watch this video. There really is no way for me to discuss what I want to talk about, the film, without spoiling the movie itself, as well as all 7 of the original Dark Tower novels. I do have a spoiler-free review. I'll put a link to it down below. So if you haven't seen the movie or have not read the books, I recommend you checking that out. So if you're still here, I'm going to assume that either you have read the books and seen the movie or you just don't care about spoilers. So I'm just going to get right into this. Most fans knew, or at least I knew, going into this movie that it was not a recreation of the first novel in the series, Gunslinger. It's essentially a sequel, because as we learn at the end of the last novel, that Roland the Gunslinger has been stuck in this loop, reliving the horrific journey towards the tower over and over again. But we're also given a bit of hope in that he has the horn this last time, signifying that this time it could be different. So I went into this movie having known that, having seen the trailers, with the knowledge that this film was going to be significantly different than The Gunslinger. Well, it's more than significantly different. It is almost entirely different. We have the Gunslinger, Roland, played by Idris Elba. We have Jake Chambers, played by Tom Taylor. And we have the Man in Black, played by Matthew McConaughey. Pretty much nothing else in the original book occurs in this movie. So, as I said in my spoiler-free review, you can come at this from a number of angles. If you have not read the books, then I feel that they threw so much at the audience that it was going to be overly confusing. I really can't elaborate on that side of it because I have read the books. I can't forget what I know from the books and just go into this movie blind. But what I can talk about is from a fan perspective. And I'm going to try to be balanced on this. I could be the uber fan and go, oh my god, they changed everything, the film is automatically horrible. And I don't want to do that. I want to give the film a chance, and this new version of the story a chance. And there are some things that I didn't mind with the changes, a couple things I actually liked in the film, and some things I did not, and I want to try to go over as much of that as I can in a relatively short amount of time. But basically, from the opening moments of the movie, we know this is going to be extremely different. We get the opening crawl that basically talks about the Dark Tower, and as I said in my spoiler-free review, basically the Dark Tower is something that we really know almost nothing about until the very end of the Gunslinger, and we only find out more about it in the subsequent books. But here we're focusing on the Dark Tower. That's the first main change. And in the opening scene is we get to see the Man in Black with his child slaves performing experiments, essentially trying to break the tower. Now here, instead of going after the beams, it's going after the tower itself. That was an interesting change. But this is also things that we know later find out that these were happening. But things that we don't actually experience until much, much later in the series. I don't think until book 6 that we really get a direct experience with what's happening in the first moments of this film. And then after that, we are introduced to Jake. And that's the other major change, is that this film is essentially told from the point of view of Jake and not the Gunslinger. It also emphasizes his psychic abilities much, much earlier than they were really emphasized in the series. So really a lot of what happens in this movie, especially when the Gunslinger and Jake return to our world, are more from book 6 than book 1. Yes, there's a lot of changes, but some of the reasons why I'm not as upset as others are, obviously from what I've seen online, is the fact that they are pulling stuff from the world. They're telling a story that is set within this world, just not the one that we were expecting. And I also want to acknowledge the obvious problems that the filmmakers were going to have in making any adaptation of The Dark Tower. I think most fans can agree. My sister who got me into these books, and she told me before I had ever read the first word that you basically have to read the Gunslinger to get to the better books. I enjoy the Gunslinger, but let's face it, compared to the other books, it's not that good. It has got a weird pacing to it. There's a lot of flashbacks, and honestly, not a lot happens. They chase the Man in Black across the desert. The gunslinger sacrifices Jake, and then he and the Man in Black have a conversation, and essentially the Man in Black escapes until we get to meet him again later. That's essentially the book. The only real action sequences are when Roland is forced to slaughter the town, and when they're escaping the slow mutants underground, and really not a whole lot happens with them. He shoots about 3 or 4 of them, and they escape. So really an accurate adaptation of The Gunslinger would have probably satisfied fans, but it probably would not have made a terribly interesting movie. The Gunslinger only works as a part of a larger whole. So they were always going to have trouble adapting a series where the first novel is admittedly not that entertaining and not very cinematic, at least from a storytelling perspective. Now, the other major problem that they were facing is the fact that this is essentially a sequel. So, retelling the story, if they had told a relatively accurate portrayal of the Gunslinger, but then changed things, like the Gunslinger doesn't sacrifice Jake, makes different choices because he has the ability now in this final turn of the wheel, those things would have worked only for fans that knew it was different from the books. The emotional weight of those moments are lost on those that have not read the books. So ultimately they went in a radically different direction, telling a story that is built on the foundations of this world that Stephen King created, but the structure of the film has no bearing on what we read in The Gunslinger. And what we're left with is the idea of, okay, if you can get beyond the idea is that this is a very, very different story and not what probably most people were looking forward to when they heard that they were making this adaptation, is what we get any good? And as I said in my spoiler-free review, I found enjoyment in this movie. Is it as good as I was hoping it would be? No. But there are things to like in this movie and things to enjoy. Now, is it very much more traditional Hollywood blockbuster? Yes. Does it have the more Hollywood ending? Definitely. Does it just build to a action-filled climax? Absolutely. And if just on principle you don't like those things, I freely understand. I'm just trying to get beyond my gut reactions and give the film an honest chance. Now, one thing I did enjoy in the movie over the books is the big battle between the Gunslinger and the Man in Black's henchmen. Yes, it's a very Hollywood-style action sequence. But one thing we never really get in the books is a chance to see Roland uninjured, completely full of his faculties, go into town on a bunch of bad guys. Really, the only time we get to see him really go at it uninjured and not as a young man is in the battle in the village of Tull, where he's basically being forced to slaughter a bunch of villagers. That's not something that we can really get behind. And then in the opening pages of the Drawing of the Three, he's injured, loses a number of his fingers, and he's never really the same again. Obviously, he still has a lot of skill, but he's never the same man again. So the chance to actually see him just go at it and see that visually captured on the screen, it was something I really enjoyed. I also did, from a visual standpoint, from just the cool factor, enjoyed his battle with the Man in Black. But that was a scene that, for a number of reasons that are central to some of my biggest issues with the movie, I didn't enjoy as much. Now, me saying positive things about this movie does not mean that I don't have serious issues with the film. One of them being that despite the fact that they throw a lot more at you, and actually more likely because they're throwing a lot more at you in this film, the explanations of what is behind everything, the tower, the pursuit of the Man in Black, why the Gunslinger's doing what he's doing, it all feels a little dumbed down and simplified for the film. These are all complex issues that just felt a little simpler in the movie. Now, obviously, in the books, we learn about this slowly over time. In The Gunslinger, it's basically Roland is going after the Man in Black for revenge. We really don't know much, if anything, about the Dark Tower until their sit down at the end. And then we learn more and more and more as it goes along about the mechanizations of the Man in Black and the Crimson King and all of that. But since they throw so much more at us early on, they had to explain more. And it just felt like it was simplified. My major real issues with this movie, and it's going to sound a little hypocritical considering what I said earlier about the movie as it would have been if they had stayed truer to the text of the novel, but acknowledged the changes as it is a sequel, is the fact that the emotional weight of this being the next turn of the wheel, and the fact that Roland has the opportunity to make better choices, is never fully realized in this film. Obviously, in the novel The Gunslinger, the emotional high point of the film is when Roland sacrifices Jake to continue his pursuit of the Man in Black. Obviously, in the film, Jake survives, and they're now moving forward. If they make the television series they keep talking about into what is essentially the drawing of the 3, or I guess the drawing of the 2, since he already has one of them still, in the form of Jake. But where my problem comes in is it never really feels like Roland was put to the test in this movie. It's implied that he is using Jake to get to the Man in Black, and even Jake realizes that at times. But it never feels like he's put on the spot to choose between Jake and the Man in Black. They have the conversation on the rooftop where it's basically the Man in Black versus the Dark Tower, revenge versus saving, all of the multiverse. But it's never really made to a personal choice between Jake and Roland's revenge. When Roland is able to open the gate and find Jake strapped to the machine and the Man in Black there, that would have been the moment where the choice could have been delivered, where the Man in Black forced him to choose between Jake and his revenge. And we don't really get that because the Man in Black crosses the portal and attacks Roland, basically forcing his hand. He's not fighting the Man in Black out of revenge, choosing him over Jake. He's fighting him out of survival. The Man in Black is attacking him, and if he did not attack the Man in Black back, he would be dead, and so would Jake, because there would be no one left to save him. So he's never really given the chance to make that choice, and I think that was something that the screenwriters in the film really missed a great opportunity. Now, obviously, the choice would have had a much deeper impact for those who have read the books and know that this is a different choice. But even at this point, considering that the film has been told through the point of Jake, we are empathizing with him, we know more about him than any of these other characters, forcing the gunslinger to make a choice, and him choosing Jake, making a different choice, I would have felt would have resonated whether you've read the books or not. And that's the biggest missed opportunity in this film. As I said a little bit in my review, my spoiler-free review, is that the emotional weight of the film never really was elevated because they never emphasized the changes from a character perspective. The story is obviously very different, and that is mostly because of how Jake learns so much earlier on and how he's attacked by the minions of the Man in Black much earlier on. Unlike in the book, where he was essentially killed to make this Sophie's Choice complete for the for the gunslinger later on. I just feel like the film would have had much more emotional weight if these changes had been built out of character decisions rather than just story changes. So overall, I don't hate this movie. I don't think it's as good as it could have been. It doesn't have the emotional weight, both for fans and non-fans, that it could have. But I did find some enjoyment out of it. And if they do make the television sequel, I will watch it and be very curious to see where they go. They've said they're going to be staying much truer to canon from now on. And I do think that was because of the issues that I laid out earlier in this video about the problems in adapting the Gunslinger in particular compared to the other books. Now, if you are a fan of the books, what did you think of the movie? What did you like and what did you not like? And if they do make the television sequel, will you watch it? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.